For ZDNet, I'm Dan Patterson, and these new generative AI platforms like ChatGPT raise all sorts of philosophical questions like, is it conscious? Can it think and reason like a human? And most importantly, is it going to take my job? Well, today's interview is with Ben Goertzel. He is a cognitive scientist and AI researcher, best known for building this anthropomorphized AI, Sophia the Robot. Now, Sophia connects to the internet to compute and access big data, but kind of points towards this future that we're at maybe right now with generative AI. Goertzel's answer to these questions is really fascinating, especially, are these new bots conscious? Can they think? His answer? It doesn't matter. You got to watch this interview. So Ben, let's start with the basics here. Everybody is talking about generative AI right now, but contextualize it for me. What moment are we living in? Is this historic, or is this just kind of a hyped blip?
I think we are living in a historic moment in the advance of AI, and what generative AI models can now do is it's genuinely really exciting and world changing. I also think there's a bit of extra hype being layered on top of what's actually an amazing and sort of epochal advance. And I mean, this is how humanity rolls, right? We can't stop with just like an amazing world changing revolution. We have to add on to it and say stuff that's even more than the reality, and that does make it a bit hard to dissect what's real from what's BS if you're not a technical person. And I would say in the AI research field, which I'm heavily engaged in, the majority of people are sort of full on, wow, this is a revolution, this is amazing, there's no telling how far these generative AI tools might go. There's a group who's engaged with the artificial general intelligence research enterprise. For example, the people who come regularly to the AGI conferences that I organize every year, who are concerned with making AIs that can really generalize, reason, and create like people and ultimately beyond. I'd say most of these AGI people are a little more on the side of, say, Gary Marcus, who's been public in saying this is a parlor trick with nothing to do with making real progress toward human-like thinking machines, and with a lot more practical limitations that are being commonly acknowledged. And I think I'm somewhat in the middle of these extremes. Like I think generative AI models are way more than a parlor trick, and that moderate improvements and revisions on the generative AI models we see now can potentially obsolete a majority of work that people are now paid to do. I mean, not exactly the current dot version of the code, but further technologies built on the same principles. So I think it's huge economically and in a human sense. In terms of progress toward AGI, toward real thinking machines, I don't think you can, I don't think GPT-7 is going to be a real thinking machine that can think like people. I think this particular class of architectures has real limitations that we can talk about a little. On the other hand, I think you can use these to accelerate progress toward AGI considerably. I think they're a serious accelerant toward AGI, even though AGI will require significant elements that are not in current generative AI models.
So actually, that's a great place to ask you about the differences between narrow AI and artificial general intelligence, which is kind of human or
Sure.
superhuman intelligence.
I mean, typically what's been referred to as narrow AI are AIs that can do a particular class of things that they've been trained to do, and they can't make a big leap beyond their historical training. Whereas what we meant by an AGI, an artificial general intelligence, is a system that can generalize in a more fundamental way, make a larger creative, imaginative, speculative leap beyond its training, programming, and history, which is is the sort of things that humans do when they do something like invent generative AI or invent the internet or invent agriculture for that matter, right? Now, that what's tricky about this distinction in the context of a system like GPT-3 or 4 or any of the many comparable systems out there is that, in essence, these are narrow AIs, but their training data is just so big, right? So they appear to be general from our standpoint as individual humans because they can do so much relative to what an individual human can do. Yet the reason they can do it is not that they're able to make big leaps into new domains. The reason they can do it is that their training data includes like every damn thing on the internet, right? Which includes representatives of pretty much everything that people do, right? So then by not taking a big leap beyond their training, but just looking for matches in their training data and munging them together, they can cover so much of human pursuit. So we're really looking at narrow AIs that are able to impersonate general AIs by just having such a broad variety of training data. They don't have to go far beyond that training data to do amazing stuff. And this is really interesting. I mean, it's a testament to the power of computer networks and multi GPU server farms and so forth, and the internet itself, right? I mean, it's amazing all the infrastructure that goes into this. And it's also instructive regarding how many human jobs and how many aspects of human life don't require any big creative or innovative leaps, but do just kind of require recycling what was done before in a moderately judicious way, right? Like you don't need to be incredibly creative and innovative or make big leaps to do most people's jobs, as it turns out.
Yeah, so are there particular industries or jobs that you see as being eminently threatened by
Well, I
generative
think,
AI?
I mean, the way it's going to work, there will be a few jobs that are entirely obsoleted, and that was already happening before generative AI. Like, a few years ago, some friends of mine made a company, Apprente, basically focused on getting rid of the guy behind the drive-through counter at McDonald's, and they were actually bought by McDonald's. And you didn't need generative AI to solve that. They solved it using the prior generation of machine learning tools. Now, what's interesting is that that works, but it's still not widely rolled out across all fast food restaurants, right? That will take a number of more years to get rolled out, to get rid of that person behind the window listening to the stuff over that tinny microphone, right? But that's instructive in how gradual the rollout is, even when something is solved. But I mean, that is though a rare case of a job that's like wholly obsoleted, right? Like you really don't need that job anymore. And the more common case will be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 90% of someone's job is obsoleted by these AI tools, depending on the case. And then the whole industry reshuffles to assign people to different job categories, right? And I mean that becomes a complex story, which is different in each domain, and sort of an acceleration of what's been happening. I mean, tools like Grammarly decrease the need for human copy editors. They don't entirely eliminate it, but they decrease that need. Automatic tools for writing journalistic articles. They've been writing like sports score summaries and weather reports for a long time. So now we're going to see more and more and more news articles automatically generated. Now some humans will be doing fact checking for these, right? So I mean, I think it's a continuation of what's been happening already, but it's a major inflection point. I mean, it's accelerating a lot. Like I read some fairly conservative analyst report recently saying maybe 80% of jobs are going to have 10% of their duties obsoleted by ChatGPT technologies. And I didn't try to make a quantitative estimate myself. That might be right if you're talking exactly about GPT-4, right? But the thing is, while GPT-4 is obsoleting some job functions, we're going on to 5, 6, and 7. And then there's teams like myself that are hybridizing large language models with machine reasoning systems, evolutionary learning, and other AI technologies, right? So we're looking at ongoing explosion in AI technology, which makes me confident it's going to be far more than that conservative 80% of jobs have 10% of their duties taken over. But even that, which is a very conservative number, is 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 huge. But I think that's a wild underestimate.
I'm glad that you mentioned Grammarly because it's a very tangible example of how AI or ML can replace one particular function or job. Are there other industries that you see as particularly vulnerable or will be maybe
I mean,
not
I would
vulnerable,
like
but
I would take the other
augmented by could
I'd
be?
take the other direction. Like what is not going to be obsoleted, which is a very small number of things. So one class of things that won't be obsoleted are jobs where the essence is human contact, right? And I mean, I have a couple kids in preschool. Like you're not going to obsolete preschool teachers because it's really about human to human teaching what it is to be a human, right? And I mean, you're not going to replace that with a humanoid robot. Now, you could have AI monitoring for safety in a preschool, which is great. I mean, you could have it help with tutoring advanced kids, but in the end, there's human emotional dynamic, which is really important there, and that's going to be a key thing in healthcare, in education, in psychotherapy, whole bunch of domains. So there's that, and you expect humans will play that function even after a singularity, where you have massively superhuman AGIs out there, right? I mean, we're still, to the extent there are still people, you'll have human on human functions and roles, whether or not there's even money to pay for it, right? And another
So
class.
that
So that's one thing, but there's another thing, which is
yeah.
anything that's really founded on making a big leap beyond what's there before. And I can think of two main categories there. I mean, one is high end of artistic creation, like inventing a new genre of music. Like these generative models are not, they're not Picasso, they're not Hendrix, they're not going to invent jazz. Like if you fed a language model music up until 1900 and nothing after, and ask it to put West African rhythm together with Western classical music, you're going to get Mozart to polyrhythms. It's not going to invent Duke Ellington, right? So I mean, there's some level of fundamental artistic creativity that few people ascend to, but yet is highly important in our culture. And I think that being a startup CEO or a top level political strategist, also by its nature, you're coping with the unknown, right? You're pivoting to deal with a world that is not charted and no one knows what it's going to be. This requires more than just retreading what's been done before. Like creating Microsoft or Amazon or Google for the first time required a Picasso or Duke Ellington level of inventiveness, right? So there, and being a great political leader in the end does too, right? So there is the sort of high end of human achievement which isn't going to be obsoleted, and there's direct human to human heart connection that's not going to be obsoleted. For me, everything else, it's a question of when and in what order and by which dot version of the software it's obsoleted. And you could go through and see which things will be obsoleted first, and it becomes a very in-depth vertical market by vertical market conversation, actually.
Well, let's stay on that. If we're looking at this maybe inflection point, the elbow in the L curve up, um,
That's one elbow. The
I think that you,
next elbow will come when you have the breakthrough to AGI, and this is not that, right? But this is one elbow. I'd say you had an earlier elbow when computer vision became a real thing, right? And that had huge
yeah,
implications. And that now we're seeing another
and
one, and
machine learning, and yeah.
maybe the next big elbow will be the breakthrough to AGI. But even without that, we're going to see incredible economic disruption. I think first to white collar jobs, then a few years from now to factory jobs as LLMs meet physical automation, right? And what we don't know is whether the breakthrough to AGI will happen before LLMs roll out in an integrated form with physical automation, right? I mean that's hard to tell, and that will make a big difference in how things unfold in the next decade.
So let's stick on that point. I it seems like whenever I talk to artificial intelligence experts or those in the community like you, or with an academic background like you have, AGI is kind of the goal. But for those who are not familiar with AGI, help us understand and appreciate the the scale of this particular goal?
I think so. The first goal in the AGI journey, which is not the final one, is to create AI systems that can reason, learn, think, invent with the capability of a human being. Let's say a smart human being, right? And so one way to think about this is make a robot that could go to MIT and get good grades. Like go to all the classes, take the exams, do the group projects, like do the whole thing, right? And that's a fairly interesting test case to me because the university is designed. First of all, it's designed to stop you from cheating, and it's also designed to test your ability to create and innovate. The exam problems are not problems that were there in your training database, right? So I mean that if you got there, you would have an AI that could do tremendous variety of things that human beings could do. In some sense, it will be a human level general intelligence. It would certainly be a very interesting achievement, right? So that's I would say goal one. But then what's interesting is once you get there, then you have an MIT trained engineer who is an AI. It can look inside its own mind, at its own code, at its own hardware. It can start solving the engineering problem of improving its own intelligence, right? And so then from that point on, you would think you're going to get very rapid increase of general intelligence from human level to a superhuman level because you have an engineered mind that can re-engineer itself, that can make a million copies of itself and experiment on itself, that can introspect and tinker with itself in a way that isn't easy to do with the human brain because it's just software running on server farms, right? So I think this is very exciting to some people, very, very frightening to other people, and harder to think about than the gradual obsolescence of jobs in journalism or accounting or something. But this is really what many of us in the field have been aiming for our careers. And I think that generative AI is genuine evidence that we're quite close to this transition to AGI, even though I don't think generative
How
AI is
close?
um hard to say. I would say 3 to 10 years. I mean, I wouldn't say it's coming in GPT-5. I'll also be shocked if it's like 30 years from now, partly because the attention and resources and enthusiasm to be put on the problem is increasing a lot now as more and more people start to take it seriously, partly because I think having all the world's knowledge in a well-curated form like we get from large language models is just a big boon to early stage AGI systems. So one thing I'm working on is taking all the knowledge in a GPT-4 type system and exporting it in a logical, reasoning friendly format so that a reasoning engine can think about it and sift out the bullshit and find inconsistencies and so forth. So that's a use of large language models that doesn't need the LLM to be the AGI. You're saying this LLM is organizing and curating all the knowledge on the web in a friendly way to feed into the mind of a separate AGI system that we're building using our OpenCog toolkit with its reasoning and learning capabilities, right? So there's a lot of different angles that are possible now, and a lot of resources and a lot of human attention going into it now, which is the kind of thing that causes something to happen quickly. Like, remember the Human Genome Project in 2001? For a long time, people were saying, well, this could take hundreds of years, it could take decades. Then what ultimately happened was Craig Venter's company got there before the US government, right? Because it was the time. Like, everyone understood it was going to be possible. One technique after another got refined, and then things really accelerated.
So, last question for you, Ben. We're talking about these kind of dumb, narrow AIs that are highly capable but not very smart, and we're talking about the path to artificial general intelligence, which is allegedly as smart or smarter than humans. One thing that separates humans from robots is consciousness. So, what is consciousness, and is that the end goal?
I don't think we need to resolve the open questions in the philosophy of consciousness to build human level or even superhuman thinking machines, but I think we can make these questions feel irrelevant. So, as one example of what I mean, how can I prove to you that I'm conscious, or you prove to me that you're conscious? I mean, as college sophomores, we all went through a period of time where we took this really seriously. We're like, well, maybe I am the only conscious being on the planet. Maybe we're all deluded that we're conscious. Then this becomes boring, both because you can't make any progress on it intellectually, and because you realize there's a strong intuitive gut sense of the consciousness of the other person, and you ultimately come to place faith in that, even though you don't have a full analytical theory of it. And I think that will happen with AI. It's like it will be palpably clear that some generation of AIs really are self-aware and experiencing things in roughly the same sense that people are. We won't necessarily have all the philosophy problems resolved, right? And I think we'll be okay with that. It's, Star Trek Transporter is an analogous example, right? Like every time Kirk or Spock stepped into the transformer, in a way, one one Kirk was killed, another one was resynthesized out of molecules who at the other end, and he believed he was the same guy as the Kirk who stepped into the transporter. So, but in Star Trek, Kirk didn't agonize too much about was the old me murdered and a new me was created with a delusion that's the same as the old me. Like transporter worked, you just do it, right? And so, I mean, that's not to say there will never be progress on the philosophy issues. I mean, I think that direct brain to brain interfacing technology and the ability to do like a brain to brain mind meld with other humans or between humans and AIs, that may give an interesting new way of approaching the philosophy of consciousness, right, based on like second person experience, which we don't have now. But on the other hand, I don't think you need to solve that to make the AGI breakthrough any more than we needed to solve the fundamental question of what is time or something to make machines that exploit special relativistic time dilation. We still don't know what is time in a philosophy sense, but we can exploit the weird dilation of time that happens at high velocity, right? So that's it. Not that the philosophy isn't interesting though. I mean, it's fun to talk about if we had more time.
I'm Dan Patterson, and for more interviews like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And for the latest in emerging technology innovation, make sure you visit zdnet.com.